The smell hit Oliver first. Rotting food mixed with machine oil and something else he could not name. The 7-year-old wrinkled his nose, but kept walking between the tall metal containers behind the spaceport commissary. His dad always told him to stay near the main buildings, but the maintenance shift was running late again, and Oliver got bored waiting on the bench that he heard the noise next. A scraping sound like claws on metal, then a thump, then silence. Oliver peeked around the corner of a waste container. What he saw made him freeze, but not from fear. Fascination locked his feet to the ground that a dragon crouched beside an overturned trash bin. At least, Oliver thought it was a dragon. He had seen pictures in school of the Drackery people. They were supposed to be tall and proud with shining scales. This one looked different. Her bronze scales were dull and dirty. She was thin, so thin he could see the outline of bones beneath her skin. She held a half-eaten protein bar in her clawed hands, eating it wrapper and all. She must have sensed him watching because her head snapped up. Her eyes were gold, large and wary like a scared animal. They stared at each other for a long moment. Oliver reached into his pocket and pulled out his sandwich. Peanut butter, his favorite. He had been saving it for the walk home. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The dragon jerked back like his words had struck her. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the sandwich in his hand, then at his face, then back at the sandwich. "I do not accept charity," she said. Her voice was rough, like she had not used it in a while. "Especially from humans." Oliver tilted his head. He did not understand why being human mattered when someone was hungry. His dad always said nobody should go without food. It was one of the rules, like looking both ways before crossing the street. "It's not charity," Oliver said. "It's lunch. My dad makes extra. We always have enough." He held the sandwich out further. The dragon stared at it. Her hand started to reach forward, then pulled back. Pride and hunger fought across her face. "My name is Oliver," he said. "What's yours?" "Wraith," she whispered. "That's pretty. Do you live around here?" Wraith's laugh was bitter. "I live nowhere." Oliver frowned. Everyone lived somewhere. He lived in apartment 412 with his dad. Even the spacers who came through the port had ships to live in. "That doesn't make sense," Oliver said. "Everyone has to live somewhere." "Not everyone," Wraith said quietly. Oliver made a decision. It was the kind of decision that came easily to 7-year-olds, the kind that adults spent hours debating. "You should come eat lunch at our place. We have a table and everything. Dad always makes enough for 3, even though there's only 2 of us. He says it's a habit from the military." Wraith's eyes went wide. "I cannot. Why not? I am Drackery. You are human. We do not." "Do not what?" "Eat lunch." The simple question seemed to break something in Wraith. Her shoulders sagged. She looked down at the garbage she had been picking through, then at the clean sandwich in Oliver's hand. "Please," Oliver said. "You look really hungry." Footsteps echoed from the main pathway. Heavy boots on concrete. David Cole rounded the corner, stopping short when he saw his son standing 10 feet from a Drackery. His hand moved instinctively toward his hip, where he used to carry his sidearm before he retired. "Old habits." "Ollie," David said carefully. "Step back, son." "But Dad, this is Wraith. She's hungry. I invited her for lunch." David took in the scene with a veteran's practiced eye. The malnourished dragon. The garbage. His son holding out a sandwich like an offering of peace. Every tactical instinct he had screamed at him to get Oliver away from the potentially dangerous alien. Every fatherly instinct saw exactly what his son saw. Someone who needed help. David had seen a lot in the Frontier Wars. He had seen humans and aliens do terrible things to each other. He had also seen moments of unexpected compassion that reminded him why he fought in the first place. He had learned that courage sometimes looked like a firefight, and sometimes it looked like choosing kindness when fear would be easier. He looked at Wraith properly now, past the species, past the potential threat assessment. He saw a kid, a scared, hungry, desperate kid. His prosthetic leg clicked softly as he shifted his weight. Wraith's eyes tracked the movement, seeing the artificial limb below his left knee. Something passed between them, an unspoken understanding. They had both fallen. They both knew what it meant to need help. "You heard the boy," David said. His voice was gruff, but not unkind. Can't let good food go to waste. Come on. Wraith looked between father and son. These humans were strange. They showed no fear, no disgust, no superiority. Just simple acceptance. The boy still held out the sandwich. The father waited patiently, asking nothing, demanding nothing. I have nothing to offer in return, Wraith said. David shrugged. Didn't ask for anything. You coming or not? Getting late, and I need to start dinner. Oliver beamed and pushed the sandwich into Wraith's hands. She took it automatically, still stunned. She looked down at the simple food like it was the most precious thing in the world. Thank you, she whispered. They walked through the industrial district toward the residential blocks. People stared. A human veteran, a small boy, and a homeless Drackery made an unusual sight. David ignored the looks. Oliver chattered about his day at school, completely unbothered. Wraith walked between them, clutching the sandwich, not quite believing this was happening. When they reached apartment 412, David unlocked the door and gestured for Wraith to enter. The space was small but clean. A couch, a kitchen table, drawings stuck to the refrigerator with magnets. The ordinary details of a life. Bathroom's there if you want to wash up, David said. Dinner in 20 minutes. Wraith stood in the doorway, unable to move. 6 months of sleeping in alleys and eating garbage. 6 months of being invisible, of being nothing. And now this human child and his father welcomed her into their home like it was the most natural thing in the world. Oliver tugged her hand. Come on, I'll show you my room. I have 17 model spaceships. Wraith let herself be led. As she passed David, she met his eyes. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. Soldier to soldier. Survivor to survivor. In that moment. Something cracked open inside Wraith's chest. Not breaking, but opening, like a door she thought had been sealed forever. David chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency while Oliver's voice drifted from the bedroom, explaining the difference between cargo haulers and military frigates. Wraith's responses were soft, barely audible, but she was responding. That was something. The rice cooker bubbled on the counter. David had learned to cook after his wife died, the same way he learned everything else in his life. Through necessity and repetition. The meals were simple but good. Enough to keep a growing boy healthy and a grieving man functional. He heard the water running in the bathroom. Good. The kid needed a cleanup point 20 minutes later. They sat around the small table. David had set 3 places without comment. Wraith stared at the plate in front of her like it might disappear if she looked away. Rice, stir-fried vegetables, chicken seasoned with garlic and pepper. Simple food, but there was plenty of it. Go ahead, David said. Oliver was already eating, using his fork to push rice onto his spoon the way his dad taught him. Wraith picked up the utensils carefully. Her clawed hands were not made for human tools, but she managed. The first bite seemed to undo her completely. She closed her eyes. Her hands trembled. You okay? Oliver asked through a mouthful of chicken. Wraith nodded, not trusting her voice. She took another bite, then another. David noticed she was trying to eat slowly, with dignity, even though her body clearly screamed for her to devour everything in sight. There's more in the pan, David said. Help yourself. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Oliver broke it, as he always did. So where do you live, Wraith? Ollie, David said quietly. What? I'm just asking. Wraith set down her fork. It is all right. I live nowhere, as I said before. I sleep where I can, behind buildings, in maintenance tunnels when the cold is bad. Oliver's face scrunched up in confusion. But why? Don't you have a family? Oliver, David said more firmly. I had a family, Wraith said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were distant. My father was a merchant. He brought us to New Harbor to establish trade routes between Drackery and human colonies. He believed our species could benefit from cooperation. She paused, pushing rice around her plate. There was an accident. A cargo hold malfunction. My parents were inspecting a shipment when the magnetic clamps failed. They died instantly. Oliver's eyes went wide. That's really sad. Yes, Wraith agreed. The Drackery consulate said I was too young to inherit my father's business. They said I should return to our home world, to my extended family. But you didn't. David asked. Wraith's laugh was hollow. My father's marriage was considered improper by our clan standards. My mother came from a lower caste. Their union brought shame to my father's family. When the consulate contacted my relatives, they refused to acknowledge me. I am, as they said, not truly Drackery. David's jaw tightened. He recognized the story. Different species, same cruelty. The consulate said they would arrange passage back to the homeworld anyway, Wraith continued. But weeks passed, then months. There were always reasons for delays. Forms to process. Approvals needed. I stayed in a youth shelter at first, but when I aged out of the program and still had no passage arranged, I had nowhere to go. That's not fair, Oliver said. His voice had the absolute certainty of a child who still believed the world should make sense. No, Wraith agreed. It is not. David leaned back in his chair. The consulate's still here. Why haven't they helped you? Wraith's expression turned bitter. I went to them many times. They said I was not registered properly. My documentation was incomplete. I needed family sponsorship. Always another requirement, another obstacle. Eventually, I understood. They wanted me to disappear. A half-caste orphan was an embarrassment. Easier to let me fade away than to acknowledge their responsibility. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. David knew that kind of bureaucratic neglect. He had seen soldiers fall through the cracks of the Veterans Affairs system, lost in paperwork while they starved on the streets. The galaxy was vast, but suffering had a familiar face across all species. That's mean, Oliver said. Really, really mean. Yes, Wraith said again. Oliver looked at his father with eyes that demanded action. David recognized that look. He had seen it in the mirror once, back when he still thought he could fix things. You can stay here, Oliver announced. We have a couch. Son, David started. We have space, Dad. And you always say we should help people who need help. David met Wraith's eyes across the table. He saw hope there, carefully hidden but present. He also saw pride fighting against desperation. He understood that battle intimately. It's not that simple, Ollie, David said. There are rules, legal things. But it's the right thing, Oliver insisted. David scrubbed his hand across his face. He was tired from his shift. His leg ached where the prosthetic connected. His bank account was already stretched thin. Taking in a homeless alien would bring complications he could barely imagine. But his son was right. It was the right thing. Tonight, David said. You can stay tonight. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. Wraith's eyes glistened. Drackery tear ducts were different from humans, but the emotion translated clearly. I do not have words, she said softly. In your language, I mean. We have a concept in Drackery. Breath sharing. It means to give of your own life to sustain another. It is the highest honor one can show. She looked at Oliver, this small human child who saw past species and status and shame. You found me eating garbage behind a building. You did not see a dragon or a problem or a stranger. You saw someone who was hungry. You offered your food, your home, your kindness. Her voice caught. Among my people, such generosity is rare. Among humans, I was told, it is unheard of. You are young and know nothing of the galaxy's cruelties. Perhaps that is why you still see clearly what adults have forgotten. Oliver did not fully understand her words, but he understood her tone. He smiled, bright and uncomplicated. You're my friend now. Friends help each other. Wraith looked at David, then back at Oliver. Breath sharing, she repeated. You have given me breath when I had none left. I will not forget this. David stood and collected the empty plates. We'll set you up on the couch. Tomorrow I'll call some people, see what we can do about your situation. No promises, but I'll try. Thank you, Wraith said. The words seemed inadequate for what she felt. Later, after Oliver was in bed and Wraith was settled with blankets on the couch, David sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. He thought about tomorrow's problems, the legal complications, his boss's reaction, the cost, but he also thought about his son's face when he offered that sandwich. The simple clarity of childhood morality. The reminder that sometimes the right choice was just the obvious one through the doorway. He could see Wraith curled on the couch, already asleep. Safe. Federal home. David raised his coffee in a silent toast to his boy. Then he started making a list of people to call. David woke to the smell of clean dishes and panic. He stumbled out of his bedroom to find Wraith standing in his kitchen, having already washed every plate, cup, and utensil in the apartment. The counters gleamed. The floor had been swept. She stood rigid, clearly terrified he would be angry about her touching his things. "I wanted to show gratitude," she said quickly. "I did not mean to overstep." David just nodded and started the coffee maker. "Thanks. Hate dishes." The tension in Wraith's shoulders eased slightly. Oliver emerged from his room, already talking about bringing Wraith to school for show and tell. David vetoed that immediately, though it took 15 minutes of negotiation to reach a compromise. Oliver could tell his friends about Wraith, but she was not going to the elementary school. After dropping Oliver at the school gates, David headed to the Colonial Administration building. The lobby smelled like floor cleaner and defeat. He took a number and waited 0.2 hours later. He sat across from a clerk who looked like she had given up on life sometime during the previous administration. "Let me understand," she said, not even trying to hide her boredom. "You want to register an alien dependent who has no legal documentation, no family sponsorship, and no current immigration status." "That's right," David said. "Can't do it." "Why not?" The clerk sighed like he had asked her to explain quantum physics to a child. "She's not a citizen. She's not registered in any system. As far as colonial administration is concerned, she doesn't exist. Taking her into your home without proper documentation could be considered harboring an illegal alien. Fine start at 10,000 credits." David kept his voice level. "She's a kid with nowhere to go. The Dracari consulate abandoned her. That's a Dracari consulate problem, not a colonial administration problem. So I'm supposed to what? Put her back on the street." The clerk shrugged. "Not my job to tell you what to do with unregistered aliens. My job is to tell you the rules." David left before he said something that would get him arrested. Work was no better. His supervisor called him into the office before his shift even started. "We need to talk about your house guest," the supervisor said. News traveled fast in a colony. David should have expected that. "Wraith is not a security risk," David said. Maybe not. But she's an unregistered alien living with an employee who has security clearance to restricted areas of the spaceport. That's a liability issue. Corporate is concerned enough to fire me over it." The supervisor had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Resolve it within a week, or we'll have to review your employment status." David's jaw clenched. "Understood." The rest of the shift passed in a blur of maintenance tasks and simmering anger. When he picked Oliver up from school, his son was buzzing with excitement. "Everyone wants to meet Wraith. Can some kids come over?" "Please." "Not right now, Ollie." "But Dad, I said no." Oliver's face fell. He went quiet, which was worse than arguing. David felt like garbage, but did not have the energy to explain adult problems to a 7-year-old home. Wraith took one look at David's face and made herself scarce in the bedroom. David sat on the couch and tried to figure out what to do next. The news program on the wall screen droned in the background. Local stories about shipping delays and construction permits. Then a segment that made David look up. It was footage from Oliver's school. Some parent had recorded video during outdoor time. Oliver stood in the center of a crowd of children, gesturing enthusiastically while he talked about his new friend. The audio was clear. "Her name is Wraith, and she's really nice. She was hungry and alone, so we gave her lunch. That's what you're supposed to do when someone needs help, right?" The simplicity of it struck something in the colony's collective conscience. Within hours, the video spread across the local networks. Parents shared it. News outlets picked it up. By evening, it had reached the wider human communication channels that David's phone started ringing. Reporters wanted interviews. Neighbors he barely knew knocked on his door. Some were supportive. Others were hostile. "Why help a dragon when human kids need homes?" One woman demanded. David closed the door in her face, but then other calls started coming. A lawyer named Patricia Brooks contacted him. She had seen the video. She worked for the Colonial Legal Aid Society and wanted to take Wraith's case pro bono. A local restaurant owner offered to donate meals. Two of David's old military buddies reached out, asking what they could do to help. "We take care of our own," one said. "And if Cole says this kid is worth fighting for, that's good enough for me." By the next morning, a legal defense fund had been established. Small donations poured in from across the colony. Oliver's school held a bake sale. The boy came home with 200 credits in a jar and a huge smile. Wraith watched all of this with growing distress. That evening, David found her packing her few belongings into the bag Oliver had given her. "What are you doing?" he asked. "I am leaving," Wraith said. "I will not let your kindness destroy your life. You will lose your job because of me. You face fines. Your neighbors hate you. I am not worth this trouble." "That's not your call to make," David said. "You do not understand. I am nothing. A half-caste orphan whom my own people discarded. You are risking everything for someone who has no value." David sat on the edge of Oliver's bed. "You know what I did in the war?" Wraith shook her head. "I was infantry. Ground combat. The kind of fighting that's up close and ugly. I saw a lot of people die. Friends. Good soldiers. Some of them died for strategic objectives. Others died protecting civilians they'd never met. You know what I learned?" He met her eyes. "Every life has value. Not because of what they can do or who their family is or what they contribute to society. Just because they're alive. That's enough. I'm not even your species," Wraith said. "Don't care. You're a kid who needs help. I've faced worse than bureaucrats and nosy neighbors. Your employer will terminate you. Then I'll find another job. You could be fined thousands of credits. Money comes and goes." Wraith's voice broke. "Why? Why do you care what happens to me?" David thought about how to explain it, how to put into words the thing that had driven him through firefights and nightmares and the long, quiet years after the war. "My son saw you eating garbage," he said finally. "He could have walked away, could have been scared or disgusted or just ignored you like everyone else did. But he didn't. He saw someone who needed help, and he helped. No hosetashchen, no conditions. He stood up. That's the kind of person I'm trying to raise. The kind who does the right thing even when it's hard. If I gave up on you now, what would that teach him? That compassion is fine until it costs something? That some people matter less than others." David moved toward the door, then paused. "You're not a problem to be solved, Wraith. You're a person who deserves safety and dignity. That's not negotiable." He left her sitting there, tears finally falling from her golden eyes. The next day, the Drackery consulate sent a formal communication. They wanted Wraith returned to proper supervision immediately. David called Patricia Brooks. "They ignored her for 6 months," Patricia said. "Now, they suddenly care? Something's wrong here." "I know," David said. "Can you find out what? I'll dig. In the meantime, don't hand her over." David had no intention of it. But that night, lying in bed, he wondered what he had gotten himself into. The legal battle was just beginning. The cost would be substantial. His job hung by a thread. But in the living room, Oliver and Wraith were building a spaceship out of cardboard boxes, their laughter drifting through the apartment. And David thought maybe, just maybe, some things were worth fighting for. Patricia Brooks worked fast. Within 3 days, she filed for refugee status on Wraith's behalf, citing the Assembly's own protection protocols. The Drackery consulate filed countermotions. Legal documents flew back and forth like weapons fire. The case drew attention beyond New Harbor. Other colonies watched. The Assembly took notice. What started as a simple custody dispute was becoming a test case for cross-species rights and responsibilities. David's supervisor called him in again. "Corporate is getting pressure from the Drackery consulate. They want you to distance yourself from this situation." "Not happening," David said. "Then I'm sorry, but fire me if you want. I'm not abandoning that kid." The supervisor sighed. "I'm not firing you. Not yet. But I can't protect you much longer." More support arrived in unexpected ways. Veterans from 3 different colonies organized a fundraiser. Local businesses donated to the legal fund. A reporter from the Colonial News Network did a feature story that painted David and Oliver as heroes standing against bureaucratic indifference. Not everyone was supportive. David received threatening messages. Someone spray-painted "Alien Lover" on his door. He cleaned it off before Oliver saw it. Through it all, Wraith transformed. Regular meals brought color back to her scales. Safety allowed her to relax. She helped around the apartment without being asked, tutored Oliver in mathematics, and slowly began to smile. The formal hearing was set for the following week. David, Patricia, and Wraith met to prepare. "They'll argue you belong with your own kind," Patricia explained. that human customs don't apply to Drackery citizens. What do I say? Wraith asked. The truth. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you want. The day of the hearing arrived too quickly. The courtroom was packed. News cameras lined the back wall. The Drackery consulate sent their senior diplomat, a stern male named Vorik who radiated disapproval. The judge was a human arbiter named Williams. She looked tired but fair. Vorik spoke first. His argument was smooth and practiced. Wraith was a Drackery citizen. Internal family matters fell under Drackery jurisdiction. Human interference was inappropriate and potentially illegal. The consulate was prepared to take responsibility for her now. She would be sent to a proper Drackery facility where she could be educated in her own culture. Patricia countered with documentation of the consulate's 6-month neglect. She presented medical records showing Wraith's malnourishment. She called witnesses who had seen her sleeping in alleys. The consulate had every opportunity to help this child, Patricia argued. They chose not to. Now that public attention makes their negligence embarrassing, they suddenly care. That's not protection. That's damage control. Then David was called to testify. He kept it simple. I found a hungry kid. My son wanted to help. We helped. That's not complicated. Vorik sneered. Your sentimentality does not change the law. Maybe not, David said. But every soldier I served with, human or alien, understood one thing. You don't leave people behind, especially kids. Species doesn't matter when someone needs help. Judge Williams made notes. Mr. Cole, you understand the financial burden you're taking on? The legal complications. Yes, ma'am. And you're willing to proceed anyway. Yes, ma'am. Then Oliver testified. Patricia had coached him, but the boy threw out the script and spoke from his heart. Wraith was sad and hungry. Now she's my friend and she's happy. Why would you want to make her sad again? The courtroom went silent. Vorik opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say to that? Finally, Wraith was called. She stood before the judge with her head high, dignity restored. What do you want, Wraith? Judge Williams asked gently that Wraith's voice was steady. The Drackery homeworld offers me nothing. No family, no future. I am, as my relatives made clear, not truly one of them. Here, with David and Oliver, I have found something I thought lost forever. A home. She looked at Vorik. These humans saw past my species, my status, my shame. They saw me. That is more than my own people offered. Vorik stood. You would choose humans over your own kind? You would disgrace your heritage? My heritage, Wraith said quietly, was my father's belief that species could cooperate, that kindness transcended biology. He died for that vision. I choose to honor it by accepting the compassion offered to me, regardless of its source. Judge Williams adjourned for deliberation. 2 hours later, she returned. This case presents unusual circumstances, she said. A juvenile of one species seeking protection from another. The law is unclear. However, the facts are not. She looked at Vorik. The Drackery consulate had 6 months to assist this child. They failed. I find their current interest to be insufficient grounds to remove her from a stable home environment. David felt Oliver grab his hand. I am granting temporary custody to David Cole, pending a full investigation into the consulate's handling of this matter. If that investigation reveals negligence or malfeasance, we will revisit the question of permanent custody. It was not a complete victory, but it was enough. For now, outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. David pushed through them, keeping Oliver and Wraith close. Vorik caught up to them in the parking area. You have made powerful enemies, he said coldly. David turned. Wouldn't be the first time. We will appeal. We will fight this. Good luck with that. Vorik leaned closer. You do not understand what you have interfered with. David's voice dropped to the tone he used to use with hostile combatants. I understand perfectly. Now get out of my way before I forget I'm supposed to be civilized. Vorik stepped back, something like fear crossing his face. David ushered Oliver and Wraith to his vehicle. On the drive home, Oliver chattered excitedly about the hearing. Wraith was quiet, processing everything. David just drove, exhausted but relieved. That night, after Oliver was asleep, David found Wraith standing on their small balcony, looking at the stars. Thank you, she said. for fighting for me. Don't thank me yet. This isn't over. I know, but you stood up anyway, knowing the cost, knowing you might lose. David shrugged. Sometimes that's what it takes. Wraith was quiet for a long moment. My father used to say that strength was not measured by victory, but by what you were willing to defend. I see his wisdom in you. Your father sounds like he was a good man. He was. I wish he could have met you and Oliver. Yeah, David said. Me too. They stood in comfortable silence, watching ships rise into the night sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The investigation, the appeals, the continued struggle. But tonight they were safe. They were together. And sometimes that had to be enough. Patricia Brooks dumped a stack of documents on David's kitchen table 3 days after the hearing. Her expression was grim. Found something, she said, and you're not going to like it. David poured coffee while Wraith and Oliver sat at the table, watching. Patricia spread out the files. I subpoenaed the consulate's communications about Wraith. They fought it, which made me dig harder. Look at this. She pointed to a message dated 2 weeks after Wraith's parents died. The consulate knew about her situation immediately. They had funds allocated for emergency repatriation, but they sat on it. What? David asked. That's where it gets interesting. I cross-referenced with assembly databases. Your father, Wraith, he wasn't just a merchant. Wraith leaned forward. What do you mean? He was a political activist, advocated for closer cooperation between Drackery and human colonies. He wrote essays, gave speeches, made enemies among the conservative factions back on your homeworld. Patricia pulled out another document. 3 months before the cargo hauler accident, your father filed a formal complaint with the Assembly about corruption in the Drackery Trade Ministry. He had evidence of officials taking bribes, rigging contracts. David saw where this was going. The accident wasn't an accident. I can't prove that yet, but the timing is suspicious. And look at this. She showed the maintenance records. The hauler had passed inspection the week before. No mechanical issues. Then suddenly catastrophic clamp failure. Wraith's hands trembled. They killed him. Maybe. The case was closed quickly. Very quickly. And then you, his daughter, get lost in bureaucratic limbo. No family claims you. No funds get released. You disappear from official records. They wanted me to die too. Wraith whispered. Oliver grabbed her hand. But you didn't. You're here. Patricia nodded. You survived. And now you're visible, thanks to David and Oliver. That makes you a problem for whoever wanted you gone. David's jaw clenched. That's why Vorik seems so angry. We messed up their cover-up. Exactly. If this goes public, it exposes corruption at high levels of the Drackery government. That diplomat's career is probably on the line. Maybe others too. So what do? David asked. We go bigger. File a formal complaint with the Assembly. Demand a full investigation into your father's death and the consulate's handling of your case. Make enough noise that they can't sweep it under the rug. That could take months, David said. Years, probably. But it's the only way to keep Wraith safe. If we expose the conspiracy, they can't just make her disappear. A knock on the door interrupted them. David answered it to find a Drackery woman in a naval uniform. She was tall, scales a deep green, expression serious. I am Commander Cirrus, she said. I need to speak with Wraith. David blocked the doorway. Not without a good reason. I served with her father. I know what happened to him, and I want to help. David studied her, then stepped aside. Comein. Cirrus sat at the table and looked at Wraith. You have your father's eyes. He was a good man. A brave man. Did you know about the accident? Wraith asked. I suspected, but I had no proof. Your father and I discussed his investigation many times. He knew he was making dangerous enemies. I warned him to be careful. Cirrus pulled out a data chip. Before he died, your father sent me copies of his evidence. I have kept them safe, waiting for the right moment. I think that moment has arrived. Patricia grabbed the chip. This is everything we need. Financial records, communications, testimony from witnesses who were afraid to speak publicly. Everything. Why didn't you come forward before? David asked. Cirrus met his eyes. Because I'm a coward. I valued my career over justice. I told myself the timing was not right, that I needed to be strategic. The truth is I was afraid. She looked at Wraith. But watching this human family fight for you when your own people abandoned you, it shamed me. You deserve better. Your father deserves justice. This will end your career, Wraith said. Probably, but some things matter more than careers. Over the next week, Patricia assembled the case with military precision. The evidence was damning. Not just corruption, but conspiracy. The cargo hauler had been sabotaged. Wraith's neglect had been deliberate. The consulate had actively prevented her from getting help, hoping she would simply die and the problem would resolve itself. Anonymous threats started arriving at David's apartment. Someone slashed his vehicle's tires. Oliver's school received bomb threats. David pulled his son from classes and set up security cameras. Wraith wanted to leave, to spare them the danger. David refused. "We're in this together," he said. "All the way." The colonial governor, initially reluctant to get involved in alien affairs, finally took notice. She called David to her office. "This is bigger than a custody dispute," she said. "If what your lawyer says is true, we have Drackery officials committing murder and child endangerment in our territory. That's a diplomatic incident. So what are you going to do about it?" David asked. "I'm assigning colonial security to protect your family, and I'm filing a formal protest with the Assembly. New Harbor will not tolerate this kind of corruption." Support came from unexpected places. Other Drackery came forward with their own stories of abuse by the conservative faction. Human colonies pledged support. The Assembly, forced to acknowledge the scandal, agreed to convene a tribunal. Through it all, Oliver remained Wraith's constant companion. When she had nightmares about her parents, he sat with her. When she was afraid, he reminded her of his father's words. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing even when you're scared. One night, David found Wraith and Oliver asleep on the couch, a blanket draped over both of them. His son's hand was still holding hers. David stood there for a long moment, thinking about the path that had led them here, that a simple lunch invitation had become a battle against corruption. A child kindness had exposed murder. A veteran's decision to help had sparked an interstellar incident. But looking at those two kids sleeping peacefully, David had no regrets. Some battles chose you. Some fights were worth having, regardless of the cost. He covered them more securely with a blanket and went to review the security feeds one more time. Tomorrow the tribunal would begin. Tomorrow they would face their enemies in an official capacity. But tonight, his family was safe. And that was what mattered. Patricia called late that evening. "The tribunal is confirmed. We present in 3 days. Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be," David said. "Good, because this is going to get ugly. They'll throw everything at us. Character assassination, legal technicalities, diplomatic pressure. Let them try." Patricia laughed. "You know, when I took this case, I thought it was just a simple custody dispute. Now we're taking on half the Drackery government. Regret it, not even a little. See you in court, David." He hung up and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, powerful people were planning how to destroy him, how to discredit Wraith, how to bury the truth. But they would have to go through a stubborn veteran, a brilliant lawyer, a brave naval commander, and one very determined 7-year-old boy first. David smiled. He liked their chances. The Assembly Tribunal chamber dwarfed any courtroom David had seen. Representatives from dozens of species filled the gallery. The proceedings were broadcast across multiple star systems. What started as a local custody case had become a referendum on justice and accountability. Point 3 arbiters presided. A human, a Trell, and a Drackery. The Drackery arbiter was ancient, her scales pale with age. Her name was Matriarch Vess, and she was known for her strict interpretation of law. Vorik led the defense with 2 other Drackery lawyers. They looked confident, arrogant. Even Patricia stood with David, Wraith, and Commander Cirrus. Oliver sat in the front row, guarded by colonial security. The prosecution presented first. Patricia laid out the evidence methodically. Financial records showing bribes. Communications revealing the conspiracy. Maintenance logs proving sabotage. Testimony from witnesses who had been silenced. "This is not a simple negligence case," Patricia argued. "This is murder. This is corruption. This is the deliberate abandonment of a child for political convenience." Vorick's rebuttal was predictable. He attacked the evidence as circumstantial. He questioned the credibility of witnesses. He argued that internal Drackery matters should not be subject to assembly oversight. The girl's father was a criminal, Vorick claimed. His death was unfortunate but justified. His daughter has been properly cared for according to Drackery custom. She was eating garbage, Patricia shot back. Is that proper care? The tribunal allowed testimony from multiple witnesses. Commander Cirrus spoke about Wraith's father, his work, his integrity. She presented the evidence he had entrusted to her, knowing it might cost him his life. David testified about finding Wraith, about Oliver's simple act of kindness, about the consulate's complete failure to help. Then Wraith herself took the stand. She spoke clearly, without hatred, but without mercy either. My father believed in cooperation between species. He believed in justice and transparency. He was murdered for those beliefs. I was left to die for the crime of being his daughter. The humans who saved me are not my species, but they show me more honor than my own people. She looked directly at Vorick. You let me starve. You let me sleep in alleys. You hoped I would simply disappear. And when I survived, when humans showed me kindness, you try to take me back not out of care, but to hide your shame. Vorick stood. You are a child. You do not understand the complexities. I understand that you are a coward, Wraith said. I understand that you value your position more than truth. I understand that my father died because men like you feared change. The chamber erupted. The arbiters called for order. When silence returned, Matriarch Vess spoke for the first time. I have heard enough testimony, but I wish to hear from the child who started this. Oliver was brought forward. He looked tiny in the vast chamber, but he stood straight like his father taught him. Why did you help Wraith? Matriarch Vess asked. Oliver thought about it. Because she was hungry. My dad always says nobody should be hungry. It's one of the rules. What rules? Like looking both ways before crossing the street. Or saying please and thank you. Or helping people who need help. They're just the rules. And do these rules apply to everyone? Oliver looked confused by the question. Of course. Rules are rules. Even aliens? Even those who are not human. Being hungry isn't about being human or alien. It's just about being hungry. The chamber fell silent. Matriarch Vess studied the small boy for a long moment. You are very young, she said. Yet you speak with great wisdom. Oliver shrugged. I just did what Dad would do. Vess looked at David. You have raised your son well. The arbiters deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, the entire chamber held its breath. The human arbiter spoke first, outlining the findings. The evidence of corruption was overwhelming. The sabotage was proven. The conspiracy was real. The Trell arbiter addressed the legal implications. Multiple Drackery officials would face criminal charges. The consulate on New Harbor would be investigated and restructured. Then Matriarch Vess spoke. Her voice carried the weight of centuries. I am ashamed, she said. Ashamed of what my people have done. Ashamed of the cowardice and corruption that led to murder. Ashamed that it took humans to show us our own values. She looked at Wraith. Your father spoke of honor and cooperation. We ignored him. We silenced him. We tried to erase his legacy by erasing you. We failed. Then she looked at Oliver. This human child understands our principles better than we have practiced them. He saw a person in need and helped without hesitation, without prejudice, without expectation of reward. That is what the Drackery once prided themselves on. We have forgotten. He reminded us. Vess stood. The tribunal rules in favor of the plaintiff. Wraith is granted permanent residency in human territory under the guardianship of David Cole. Those responsible for her father's death will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of assembly law. The Drackery government will issue a formal apology and provide financial restitution. She paused. Furthermore, the assembly will implement new protections for orphan juveniles across all member species. No child will fall through bureaucratic gaps again. We will call these the Wraith provisions. The chamber erupted in applause. David felt Oliver crash into him, hugging tight. Wraith stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Patricia was grinning. Commander Cirrus saluted Wraith's father's memory. Outside the tribunal, reporters swarmed. David pushed through them, keeping his family close. Vorik was being led away by assembly security. His career was over. Others would follow down on the transport back to New Harbor. Oliver fell asleep against Wraith. She stroked his hair gently, still processing everything. "What happens now?" she asked David. "Now we go home. You finish school. We figure out the future one day at a time." The assembly offered me a scholarship to the youth academy. David felt a pang but nodded. "That's a good opportunity. I am afraid," Wraith admitted. "Afraid to leave. Afraid I will lose this. Lose you and Oliver. You won't lose us. Family doesn't work that way." "Family," Wraith repeated. She had not had a family in so long. "Yes, family." 1 year later, David stood at the spaceport with Oliver. They were waiting for Wraith to return from her first semester at the academy. She emerged from customs taller, more confident, wearing the academy uniform. But when she saw them, the formal bearing dropped. She ran to them, and they embraced. Oliver had made her a drawing. Wraith had brought gifts from a dozen different worlds. They walked to David's vehicle, talking over each other, laughing to take tea home. Over dinner, Wraith told them about her classes, her friends, her plans. She was studying interspecies law and diplomacy, following her father's dream in her own way. "I want to make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else," she said. David nodded. He understood that drive, the need to turn suffering into purpose. Later, when Oliver was in bed, David and Wraith sat on the balcony like they used to. The city stretched below them, ships rising into the night sky. "I've been thinking about that first day," Wraith said. "When Oliver found me, when you brought me home, I was so broken, so lost. I had given up. But you didn't stay lost," David said. "No, because a 7-year-old boy saw me eating garbage and thought that was wrong. Because you risked everything to keep me safe. Because people I had never met fought for me." She looked at David. "In Drakery, we have a saying, strength is measured not by the battles you win, but by those you defend. You defended me when I could not defend myself. That is true strength." David shrugged, uncomfortable with praise. "Just did what was right." "Yes, and that is why it mattered." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Tomorrow, Wraith would help Oliver with his homework. The day after, David had to testify at another corruption trial. Next week, Wraith would speak at a conference about child welfare reform. But tonight, they were just a family. Unconventional, forged by chance and choice, held together by something stronger than blood, that a veteran. A boy, a dragon, and a simple lunch that changed the galaxy. Inside, Oliver called out that he could not sleep. Wraith wanted to read him a story. David followed, leaning against the doorframe as Wraith settled beside Oliver's bed with a book of Drakery folktales. Her voice rose and fell in the rhythmic patterns of her native language, then switched to human standards so Oliver could understand. The boy's eyes grew heavy. David watched them and thought about all the unlikely paths that had led here, all the choices that had mattered, all the moments when they could have turned away and chosen differently. But they had not, and the galaxy was better for it. When Oliver finally slept, Wraith carefully closed the book. She kissed the boy's forehead, a gesture she had learned from David. Together they turned off the light and closed the door. "Thank you," Wraith whispered in the hallway. "For everything." David just nodded. Words were not needed. They both understood. Some bonds were forged in fire, others in simple acts of kindness. But the strongest were those built on the foundation of seeing another's need and choosing to help, regardless of the cost. That was the lesson. That was the truth a small boy had known instinctively, and the galaxy had to learn the hard way that in the end, it was enough.